The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
That's a 200-vote defeat.
That's extraordinary. Well,
Massive.
It's not entirely unexpected, but it's much bigger than I expected myself.
That, Gary, is too big for her, surely, now to say, I'm still in charge and I'm going back to Europe?
The government was desperately hoping to keep it way, way, way below that number, and I think it will be an absolute shock to the system. The sort of strategy that she was talking about to Cabinet today, which involved probably not reaching out to Jeremy Corbyn, but reaching out to a few Labour backbenchers, just trying to do a bit more incremental stuff, what she'd been doing already, that doesn't wash now. We do seem to have moved into a new moment. And now the Prime Minister's speaking.
It means nothing has moved.
This deal,
Here we go.
but
Here's
tonight's vote
Prime Minister
tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took in a referendum Parliament decided to hold. And people, particularly EU citizens who've made their home here, and UK citizens living in the EU, deserve clarity on these questions as soon as possible.
Order! There's no good people shouting. There will be an opportunity for other points of order, but the Prime Minister must and will be heard. The Prime Minister.
Those whose jobs rely on our trade with the EU need that clarity. So, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to set out briefly how the government intends to proceed. First, we need to confirm whether this government still enjoys the confidence of the House. I believe that it does, but given the scale and importance of tonight's vote, it's right that others have the chance to test that question if they wish to do so. I can therefore confirm that if the official opposition table a confidence motion this evening, in the form required by the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, the government will make time to debate that motion tomorrow. And if, as happened before Christmas, the official opposition declined to do so, we will, on this occasion, consider making time tomorrow to debate any motion in the form required from the other opposition parties, should they put one forward. Second, if the House confirms its confidence in this government, I will then hold meetings with my colleagues, our confidence and supply partner, the DUP, and senior parliamentarians from across the House to identify what would be required to secure the backing of the House. The government will approach these meetings in a constructive spirit, but given the urgent need to make progress, we must focus on ideas that are genuinely negotiable and have sufficient support in this House. Third, if these meetings yield such ideas, the government will then explore them with the European Union. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by offering two reassurances. The first is to those who fear that the government's strategy is to run down the clock to the 29th of March. That is not our strategy. I've always believed that the best way forward is to leave in an orderly way with a good deal, and have devoted much of the last 2 years negotiating such a deal. As you confirmed, Mr. Speaker, the amendment to the business motion tabled last week by my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Beaconsfield, is not legally binding, but the government respects the will of the House. We will therefore make a statement about the way forward and table an amendable motion by Monday. The second reassurance is to the British people who voted to leave the European Union in the referendum 2.5 years ago. I became Prime Minister immediately after that referendum. I believe it's my duty to deliver on their instruction, and I intend to do so. Every day that passes without this issue being resolved means more uncertainty, more bitterness and more rancour. The government has heard what the House has said tonight, but I ask members on all sides of the House to listen to the British people who want this issue settled and to work with the government to do just that.
Should be next, I think.
I will come to other colleagues, but first of all, point of order, the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The result of tonight's vote is the greatest defeat for a government since the 1920s in this House. This is a catastrophic defeat for this government. After 2 years of failed negotiations, the House of Commons has delivered its verdict on her Brexit deal, and that verdict is absolutely decisive. I hear the words of the Prime Minister, but actions of her government of the past 2 years speak equally clearly. She is only attempting to reach out now to try to keep her failed process and deal alive after it's been so roundly rejected by Parliament on behalf of the people of this country. Labour has laid out our priorities consistently. No deal must be taken off the table. A permanent customs union must be secured, and people's rights and protections must be guaranteed so they do not fall behind. At every turn, the Prime Minister has closed the door on dialogue. Businesses begged her to negotiate a comprehensive customs union. Trade union leaders pressed her for the same thing. They were ignored. In the last 2 years, she's only had one priority: the Conservative Party. Her governing principle of delay and denial has reached the end of the line. She cannot seriously believe that after 2 years of failure, she is capable of negotiating a good deal for the people of this country. The most important issue facing us is that the government has lost the confidence of this House and this country. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, inform you I have now tabled a motion of no confidence in this government. And I'm pleased that motion will be debated tomorrow, so this House can give its verdict on the sheer incompetence of this government and pass that motion of no confidence in the government.
That's it. The Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, has tabled a motion of no confidence. Gary.
Jeremy Corbyn's been holding back from doing this because he doesn't think he can win it. But what's extraordinary tonight is the scale of that defeat means that all sorts of other possibilities open up the other side of that vote, because we think that the DUP will row in with the Tory MPs. They'll all come back together for the vote tomorrow. And then it looks as though we move into a new dispensation. There was Theresa May saying that she's going to reach across the floor and try and find out where the consensus is. Jeremy Corbyn coming back at I think many people across the party divide would say, saying that, with some accuracy, saying that she was pretty late in doing that. This would mean, though, that she'd have to pivot to a position a long way from where she's been, potentially full membership of the customs union, maybe even more than that, a softer Brexit, even than that.
Gary Gibbon. Let's go straight now to Krishnan in the House of Commons lobby with guests streaming in.
Yeah, thank you, John. Joining me now, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Joanna Cherry from the Scottish National Party, and Sammy Wilson from the Democratic Unionists. First of all, there's going to be a vote of no confidence. Should she go? You've been wanting her to go.
Well, I lost the vote of no confidence within the Conservative Party. I've accepted that result, and I will support the Prime Minister and the government in the vote tomorrow.
So what happens now?
What happens now? Well, the Prime Minister set it out in her statement, which I thought she did extremely well and clearly, that she will consult, she will see what there is support for, and then she'll go back to the EU and say, look, I couldn't get this through, it needs to be changed.
Yes.
What she said in her statement was very sensible.
She clearly still thinks her deal is the basis of any future.
A majority of well over 200 says otherwise.
Joanna Cherry.
Of course she should go. This is the biggest defeat for a British government in modern history. She's made a complete mess of the negotiations. The only thing she's got right is that she's acknowledged she needs to reach out to senior parliamentarians from across the House, but she's not the person to lead now. I think what we need is a temporary executive of unity to go back to the EU to ask for an extension of Article 50, hold a second EU referendum, and then revoke Article 50, hopefully in the light of a Remain vote. And she needs to involve the Scots in that. If it wasn't for Scottish parliamentarians, we wouldn't know that the United Kingdom had the right to unilaterally revoke Article 50. She needs to listen to the voice of the devolved administrations, and she needs to acknowledge the fact that the Scottish Parliament has a mandate to hold a second independence referendum.
Sammy Wilson, you now hold this government's future in your hands. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, the government holds its future in its hands. The government has to listen to the message, a very clear message that was given tonight, not just by the opposition parties, but also by a large section of the Conservative Party. And the Prime Minister now needs to go back to Europe and tell Europe, we are not going to roll over any longer. We want a deal which gives us a fair relationship with you in the future, but we are not going to be some footstool for Brussels for the future.
Why are you giving her your confidence tomorrow?
Because
when there is no reason to think she's going to do what you want her to do.
Well, if she doesn't do that, and I mean, we've made it clear all along that if she proceeded with this agreement, which would have destroyed the Union, which would have separated Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom, which would have damaged us economically by cutting us off from the rest of the United Kingdom, then we would not support her government. But that is no longer going to happen, because Parliament has told her she cannot go down that route, and therefore we want to see a Conservative government delivering on its own manifesto and on the result of the referendum. When they do that, they'll have our full backing.
Right, and when none of that works, are you happy to crash out on March the 29th?
Well, if we reach the 29th of March, it is not whether we are happy to crash out or not.
Are you prepared
Once we reach the 29th of March, we will not be crashing out. First of all, we will be entering a relationship with the EU based on the same relationship as we have with America and with other countries in the world, a regulated trading regime.
That is not true.
It is true. It is true.
It's the nonsense that we will be in the same relationship as America. We won't. There are all sorts of bilateral
Channel
deals.
4 may believe that. Channel 4 may believe that. But the truth of the matter...
No, it's a fact. It's not what Channel 4 are saying. Sammy, it's not what Channel 4 are saying. It's a fact. No, it's a fact. And the offer the deal you want from the EU is not on the table. The backstop that you dislike so much is there because of the United Kingdom's international obligations. It's time to wake up and smell the coffee. The reality is, it's this deal or remain. The vote should now go to the people of Britain, and they should get the choice between this pitiful deal that Parliament has voted down and the choice of remaining, and I'm confident that they'll choose to remain. And if they don't, the Scots will be going their separate way.
Well, what does appear to be the case now is that if all of this fails, there will be indicative votes. Parliament will make it clear that no deal is not what Parliament wants. What are you going to do then? What should the government do then?
Well,
ignore it?
You say that Parliament will say this, but Parliament passed with an overwhelming majority the Article 50 Act to begin a 2-year process, and it passed the Withdrawal Act. Both of these in the knowledge that if no deal was agreed, we would leave without a deal.
So an indicative vote should be ignored, is that what you're saying?
An indicative vote cannot challenge the law which was passed by Parliament.
Absolutely, but the question is, should the government respect an indicative vote or not? You seem to be saying the government should forget it.
The government should respect the law. Parliament has the means to legislate. If it hasn't legislated, the law it passed, the Withdrawal Act was passed in June of last year. Most of the MPs saying we can't leave without a deal actually voted for a law that provides for us to leave without a deal, and not, if I may say so, crashing out, which is a politically prejudicial
Leaving
term.
without a deal.
Yeah, but Channel 4 really shouldn't be using these politically charged terms. You're meant to be an impartial broadcaster.
And we are.
So let's just... Yeah, but you were saying to Mr. Wilson crashing out, and you really ought not to say that because you're meant to be impartial.
I'm talking to you about whether the government should respect the will of Parliament. And you're saying an indicative vote should be ignored.
Absolutely. The law...
So the government should just ignore it?
For very good reason. The law is hard to change. That's one of the foundation stones of protecting our liberties and our constitutional legal order. So, of course, the law overrides any individual motion of the House of Commons.
Thank you all very much indeed.
The House of Commons can vote to change the law. That's what needs to happen now. You're always going on about how your beloved Parliament is supreme. It's time for it to act, to change the law, to enable us to have a second vote.
The House of Commons cannot change the view of the people of the United Kingdom who voted 2.5 years ago to leave. We have a date for leaving. We have a date for leaving, and we will leave on the 29th of March.
Northern Ireland.
Let's see.
Yeah, welcome back to Strasbourg here. So, I mean, just a few minutes ago when the result was announced in London, you could hear the gasps on every floor of this building because practically everyone was watching proceedings in London live. Let's talk to Mourad McGuinness, Vice President of the European Parliament. 230. What's your response to that?
Well, I think you said people were gasping. I mean, there's no doubt that everyone was glued to what was happening in the House of Commons. I suppose in a calm moment, I'd say this is very decisive. I thought the Prime Minister, in her summary after the result was delivered, was quite clear about the next steps. We had anticipated perhaps not quite as big a margin. And I think we're going to have to wait and analyse who's voted what way, because what strikes me, and always has, is that this has been rejected by such a large margin, but people voted against it for different reasons. So, for example, some people dislike the idea of an agreement at all, so they want a hard Brexit. Others, like Jeremy Corbyn, wants a customs union, so they don't like the flavour of it. Well, the deal is on the table. from the European Union side.
It's just been given a death
It's very
certificate.
clear what the House of Commons has said in terms of the numbers.
Right.
It is not clear what the House of Commons wants next. So this is for me quite critical. So we hear the result, very clear and very strong. We also have heard Jeremy Corbyn and others say a no deal must be off the table. So my question is, and I think Donald Tusk, President of the Council, is also saying this, so if this deal is not acceptable and if no deal is not acceptable, what will work?
Right.
And I'm asking this of the United Kingdom.
So you would welcome the indicative
will work?
votes in the House of Commons that go through the various different options, for instance?
Yeah, but I don't think it's clear from the votes that have taken place thus far as to what a majority in the House of Commons will want. And I take it back to my question. You can analyse the big picture and say, yes, it's rejected. But you have to look at the details here, because what would satisfy some in the House of Commons in terms of tweaking will dissatisfy others. So I think we're going to have to be calm, listen to what the House of Commons has said, but this is really an issue for the United Kingdom, as it has been thus far and continues to be.
But when it comes to Brexit and the economic repercussions, Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom are joined at the hip on this one. This affects you almost as much as it affects us.
Absolutely, and we've always said that, and we're near neighbours and we're good friends and we have to find a way forward. But remember, Ireland is the European Union. We're not part of just, we are intrinsically part of the EU 27, and therefore the pain that we might feel will be felt by the rest of Europe. And as the Prime Minister very clearly said, the pain of a no deal will affect British citizens in a way which I think needs to be fully understood.
But there are so many potential options. Which one would you like to see advanced now?
Well, I suppose, even though this will sound strange, I'm glad that we've had a vote. I'm glad that at this stage we know the extent of the rejection, but I'm going to go back to my original point and say I need to reflect perhaps overnight and tomorrow as to who has voted what way, what would satisfy different members of the House of Commons, because while there are those who want a hard Brexit and want Brexit, there are also members of the House of Commons who dream of another vote. So we have to be quite analytical and quite clear from a European perspective that the deal we have negotiated in good faith with the United Kingdom remains on the table.
And in 5 seconds, a second referendum, yes or no?
It's not for me, not my call.
All right. Maura McGuinness, the Vice President of the European Parliament, back to you in London.
Thank you, Matt, there in Strasbourg. Well, now that's all for Channel 4. We're continuing to broadcast on More 4 for the next hour with reaction to the defeat of Theresa May's deal. Join us. Well, now, the headlines tonight. MPs have rejected Theresa May's Brexit deal by 432 votes to 202, a majority of 230. The crushing defeat for her withdrawal agreement is the biggest defeat for a government in modern times. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn called a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, which will be voted upon tomorrow. You can continue to watch our live coverage of the historic vote on More 4. But for now, on Channel 4, good evening. Right, joining me now is Nigel Farage. After all, a man who started the wretched ball started rolling in the first place, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in independence.
Pleased with your work thus far?
Oh, well, if we'd gone for Brexit, if we had a Prime Minister who believed in Brexit, it would have been done and dusted by now. But the problem is, we had somebody who didn't believe in it, and we saw tonight, after she lost by that massive margin of 230...
So it's all Mrs May's fault?
She doesn't want us to be an independent country. And that's the problem.
Poor old thing. She's really struggled on this thing. She's given her all, you must admit.
Well, she's useless. I mean, you can try hard and be useless, and she is utterly useless. That deal didn't suit anybody. It's been defeated. I thought
Should she resign?
Well, of course she should. Of course she should. I suspect she'll go back to Brussels and try and get a concession. But actually, would Brussels now give us a concession, given of any kind, given the scale of that defeat? I fear not. The real truth of it is, 494 MPs voted to trigger Article 50, all right? Article 50 said we have a 2-year period within which to negotiate a withdrawal agreement or, I quote, failing that, we just leave. So to honour the referendum result, to honour their own vote in Parliament, what should happen is we should now be preparing to leave on WTO terms on March the 29th.
This Parliament has represented the people quite brilliantly.
Really?
Yes.
Which people?
All the people, because it is as divided as the rest of the country.
No, it isn't.
This country is not united about leaving Europe. It is not, and you know that better than I do.
Well, hang on a second. You know, we had a referendum
Yep.
in which there was a majority.
Yep.
We had a general election in which both parties promised they'd take us out of the European Union. We then had an Article 50 vote that nearly 500 MPs supported, and now they're trying to turn their backs on us. And what you're finishing up with here are many millions of people in unprecedented numbers feeling Parliament doesn't represent them.
Well, now, news coming in from the Parliament, the motion of confidence against the Prime Minister will be heard at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. What a funny thing. I have a feeling we'll be on air at exactly the same time. You better join us. Nigel Farage, what should happen?
Well, what should happen is we should leave on WTO terms.
No. I mean, what should happen tomorrow night?
Oh, tomorrow night? Oh, well, I can't see the DUP.
You're going to be supporting Labour. This will be a first of all time.
I can't see the DUP
You're suddenly in bed with Nigel Corbyn.
Oh, listen, I've worked with Labour Eurosceptics over the years and shared many platforms with them. No, I don't think he'll succeed because the DUP will not support this, in my view. I think, if you ask me what I really think is going to happen, I think that'll go down, and I think we're going to finish up, and I'm talking against my own book here, but I think the most likely outcome now is an extension of Article 50.
And that she will survive.
Yes.
Because the DUP have said that they will support her.
Well, and the other point is, if she
And actually, you would support her too.
Well, I don't support her, but the Tory party is fearful.
You said terrible things about her, but you would have to support her tomorrow.
I think she's the worst Prime Minister in living
So
memory.
you want her defeated tomorrow night?
No,
Well, come on, she can't be the worst Prime Minister of all time.
I think she should resign. I think she shouldn't wait till 7 p.m. tomorrow. She should go.
So
she's failed.
You want her defeated?
She's failed, but the problem, of course, is it'll put the Tory party into a civil war.
You're between a rock and a hard place. You don't want her. She might prevail. Democracy might dictate that she remains. And then you're stuffed.
I want a true Brexit. And at the moment, it's very difficult to see, as it is for 17 million people, how this place can deliver it.
She said, my deal, no deal, or we remain. Looks like she might have said something.
Well, let's go for no deal, and then we honour the referendum.
Thank you, John. Well, with me here in the lobby are Anna Soubry and Lucy Powell from Labour. Anna Soubry, your reaction first. Where are we now?
I don't know, is the simple truth. I think we're in some seriously difficult water, truthfully, because I'm quite shocked at the scale of the defeat. I didn't think it would be as big as that by any means at all. And so I think that, as I say, we're in very difficult and dangerous territory.
Are you considering voting against the Prime Minister?
Not tomorrow. Good God, no. You must be joking. I should be supporting the Prime Minister, and there's no problem tomorrow with that. It's just where she's going to go now on Brexit, and her own authority is, I have to say, hugely undermined. I don't know all the figures. I think Lucy might know that. I think it's 118 Conservatives went in and voted against it, and I was one of them. And you know my reasons why they're well rehearsed. But I think the danger is now is the authority of the Prime Minister. And the position she finds herself in. I mean, she seems to be determined to battle on, but fine. But what the hell is she going to do? Because we cannot go on like this, and we need swift resolution. But my own view is that we have debated this over and over again, not in any meaningful way, but, you know, the idea that there's some Norwegian model, no disrespect to Lucy, that we're all going to go off into is for the birds. If they want to test it, fine. But we need now to get on and move on swiftly. And you know my view, the only way through the impasse, which there is, I think it's a majority against no deal. I think Norway, that went a long time ago and it was there and it's gone. So what the hell is anybody going to do? The only thing is to go back to the British people.
Yes, but before that, are you suggesting that once you have confidence in the government, Theresa May should be thinking about stepping down and somebody else taking over?
No, I don't. The last thing...
That's what it sounds like.
No. I think it's the shock, though, because in normal times, frankly, I think that would happen. I mean, good God, this is a flagship policy of magnitude, and the PM loses by that. But no, because the last thing we want is a leadership election. God help us from that. Because, you know, time is against us. Yes, I know we can extend and we can take it out of legislation, but in terms of the public, they are getting sick up to the back teeth of this.
Right,
we need to make
she's going to
progress.
reach out, she says. What is it that the House can agree on?
Well, look, that's absolutely what she's now got to do. I mean, she had a choice today about whether she continued to sort of double down on her strategy of trying to constantly appease her Brexiteers and the DUP, or did she face the other way and try and reach out across the House of Commons and build a consensus? And I think she's indicated tonight she's going to do the second of those. That's long, long overdue. I think there is an appetite for her to do that because actually, for all the noise about a second referendum, I don't believe there is a majority for that in Parliament, because I think MPs are very worried about the consequences of the second referendum. I think if we can come to an agreement before, I mean, maybe that's the very, very final sort of stage of
But
things.
you don't think there's agreement for Norway Plus either, do you?
Well, look, I think, there are many, many people who have come up to me in the last, week or two.
A majority we're talking about.
Potentially, because I think what we've got to all now look at, the Prime Minister and others down, is what is it we could live with? What is our plan B? What is our second choice option? I'm not suggesting it's sort of clickbait that everyone's going to be emailing MPs about. Compromises don't look like that.
Well, you could live with Norway Plus, couldn't you?
Well, I've been making the case for it for the last 2 years, for God's sakes. I mean, I've had death threats. I've been threatened with deselection because that's what I've been arguing for. And the trouble is, it was always only going to work if the Prime Minister, and I did say this to her, I said it to her face. I said, Prime Minister, you can get the single market and the custom union. It's the right thing to do by British business, solves your problem in Northern Ireland, and you go over the heads of the Labour front bench and you reach out to the sensibles and moderate people that are sitting beyond it. And she would not do that. And you've heard all the speeches today. She's had every opportunity. Now she says she wants to do it. The truth is, as you heard from Stephen Doughty today, you heard from Ben Bradshaw, that has gone. And one of the reasons is because people see the real alternative now of a people's vote.
Can I just call Hilary Benn? Can I just call you over for a second? We're live on Channel 4 News. Sure. What's going to happen now? Where is the agreement in the House of Commons? Is what we're trying to work out. When Theresa May says she's going to reach out to you all.
Well, I mean, she should have done this 2.5 years ago. And it's all very well to say now that she's going to reach out and try and seek a consensus. My own view is,
well,
I think...
You're not listening, is what you're saying.
Well, the big question is, will she listen? Because she hasn't been listening for 2.5 years. I think the House of Commons should now have a chance to vote on a series of potential alternatives. That would be the rational and the sensible thing to do, because it would be a way to find out whether there is something on which there might be a consensus.
Show that there's nothing you can agree on.
Well, it might, but then you have to work out what you do after that. But a good place to start would be, is there something that can command an alternative support in the House of Commons, given the scale of this utterly humiliating defeat this evening?
Look, people at home are going to be tearing their hair out thinking, I thought this was it. This was the night.
No, we've never said that.
Now, when are we going to get any kind of resolution?
When she can find a majority in the House, and we all agree on these terrible failings, I'm afraid to say, of my Prime Minister. And she now is saying, as Hilary identifies, Aunt Lucy, she's reaching out. My point is there are a lot of people who have moved on from that now, because we see that we can get a people's vote.
I know, but I do think...
And I know that's difficult.
I know.
Nobody wants it in many ways.
But I do think, and I mean, I know they're not the noisy people who are often on the news and on the telly, but I personally believe, from talking to a lot of colleagues, especially on our side, and I think on the Conservative side as well, there's a lot of worry about a second referendum, especially if it comes off the back of the fact that we as MPs, who are paid a lot of money to make decisions and come to agreement, we can't agree between ourselves what Brexit needs to look like. And I actually think in these last few days now, there's a growing recognition, because no one voted tonight against that deal with gung-ho and kind of joy about it. We all knew that it was a very, very difficult decision, and I do think, and the Prime Minister needs to lead some of this, but there's other people who will if she won't, that MPs will try and hold their nose a bit and accept that maybe their preferred option won't happen, and see what we can live with and what we can gather around.
It's your party policy.
That's our party policy.
Your policy is the people's vote.
There's one thing that she needs to do straight away. She said something significant just now. We will not allow the clock to run down. Now, she needs to follow through the logic of that statement and say to the House of Commons, we will not allow the United Kingdom to leave the European Union without an agreement. Because the businesses that are watching tonight, you talk about people tearing their hair out, the businesses will be saying, well, what on earth is going to happen? What am I meant to be planning for? And no responsible government could allow us to leave without a deal. And the Prime Minister, if she ruled that out, that would be the first practical contribution she would make to the process that we need now to follow, and which Lucy has set out.
And then there's two Labour MPs here. The confidence vote tomorrow, it's a bit of a waste of time.
Thank you don't want me, I'm off. Is that all right?
Well, we would have quite happily had another answer, but you can go if you need to. Thank you very much indeed. Can I just ask you, it's a waste of time tomorrow, isn't it?
No, it's not a waste of time. I think it's a very important exercise because, as Anna said earlier, in any historical context at all, when that happened to a Prime Minister, they would either resign or call a general election themselves, you know. So it's really important that Parliament is asked that question. I mean, I think it's unlikely that Parliament will vote for no confidence in the government because the DUP and others already said they'll back her, but it's a necessary test that needs to now happen.
Lisa Powell, Hilary Benn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Indeed. And the tactic, I suppose, of dropping your amendment worked, in that the defeat was huge.
Well, the defeat was huge, but in the end it was going to be huge, and we've seen that tonight.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's leave Westminster, go to Walsall and Darshna Soni.
Well, I'm at the Block Switch Memorial Working Men's Club here in Walsall, where we've been watching the vote tonight, Krish. Tuesday night is one of their busiest. There's all sorts of clubs going on here. There's a snooker club, a keep fit class upstairs. We've even seen some men walk by with air rifles, but we're told it was nothing to do with the result. There's a shooting club going on next door. Now, this area had the highest number of Leave voters in the whole of the Black Country. Just one ward out of 20 voted Remain. Well, after tonight's dramatic events, do those voters feel that we're any closer to achieving what they voted for 2.5 years ago? Let's find out by speaking to some of them. Thank you for joining me. Dave, what do you make of tonight's result?
I think
huge defeat.
I think it's the best possible result that could be for Britain.
Really, you wanted them to vote against it?
Absolutely, yes.
But
yes.
Theresa May warned that it could lead to us crashing out of the EU.
Crashing out a phrase that's used too much and too loosely. We won't be crashing out of anywhere. They still want to trade with us. EU, the rest of the world, still want to trade with Britain, fifth biggest economy.
So you welcome the result?
Yeah, it's just a shocker that they've told so many lies.
There was a huge build-up to this vote, Wade, and lots of people were talking about it, you know, lots of journalists and politicians. But you were saying you feel removed from all of that.
Totally out of touch since the very first vote and voting leave.
You're fed up with it all?
Fed up with it because what we voted for wasn't, you know, what the British people wanted wasn't followed through.
So you're pretty fed up despite tonight's vote?
Totally, yeah.
Right.
It seems like it's going in the right direction, still leaving.
Brilliant. Well,
What does tonight tell us about British democracy?
Well, I think it shows that Parliament, when it's asked to, can hold the executive to account in a very successful way. And I think that the House of Commons has shown that this deal was not right for the UK. We're a great country, a great economy, a great democracy. And the problem with the deal was it didn't really allow us to take advantage of the opportunities of Brexit. So you couldn't really do proper free trade deals, you couldn't really take back control of your laws, you were kept locked in, or else you had to accept the loss of control of Northern Ireland.
She's saying she wants to reach out to you now to see what it will take. What will it take?
I think there's a lot of us, and I think a large... You listen to people like my brother or across all sides on the Labour benches, all sides of the House of Commons, we think the fundamental problem lies in this Irish backstop that keeps us locked in the customs union and in the single market, or single market regulation, unless you're willing to cede effective control of Northern Ireland. And that's obviously not something that any UK government could do, so it's a trap. And what we need, and I think it's quite simple, is a voluntary exit from that backstop mechanism. So
just the power to leave, the power to have
the unilateral
a hard Brexit.
No, that's not a hard Brexit. No, the unilateral power to come out and to say, right, we're going to do our own thing and we'll strike a different arrangement. But there's stuff in this deal. I want to stress, Krishnan, there's stuff in this deal.
Agree to that? I mean, how can Ireland agree to that?
Because I think both sides in the UK, Dublin, Brussels, everybody's made the same point. We do not want a hard border. And not only that, but there's no need for a hard border or any intention to put a hard border in place. So we can fix that problem. What we need to do is use the implementation period that runs from March this year, or is, I hope, going to run from March 29th this year, to negotiate a big Super Canada-style free trade agreement with the EU.
So you think we would still have a withdrawal agreement with an exit from the backstop, and then get rid of the political declaration and try and negotiate some sort of Canada deal?
Pretty much right. I think that is what the PM needs to do now. She has a massive mandate now. What this vote has given Theresa May is a huge mandate for change of this agreement. She has the overwhelming view of MPs on both sides of the House of Commons that they want their democratic rights and democratic freedoms of this country upheld, and they want to see a Brexit that really lives up to what the people voted for.
I mean, Europe has said all along what you're laying out is impossible.
Well,
if that continues...
If I may respectfully say, they've been saying that, but they haven't actually been asked. The funny thing is...
I mean, they've said it voluntarily.
The funny thing is that we have at no stage in the last... We've had 5 weeks now since the decision was... The vote was mysteriously whisked off the table. And in that period, we haven't even asked Monsieur Barnier, the European Commission, whether they will seriously amend or remove the backstop.
And if it's still no...
Well, what's really changed in the last 6 weeks, and it's not an outcome I necessarily want, but it's one I think that people are increasingly looking at, and that is coming out at WTO terms and on World Trade terms. And it was quite interesting listening to Jean-Marc Puissesseau, the chairman-president of the ports of Calais-Boulogne the other day, when he was asked, are there going to be huge hold-ups as a result of checks at Calais? And he said, absolutely not. The lorries will continue to flow as they do
Theresa
today.
May the wrong person to negotiate this deal? Could you get a better deal?
What she needs to do now, and we had that argument in the Conservative Party, as you may remember, last month. So forget that.
But she could just honourably leave, couldn't she?
We had that discussion last month. Let's forget about that. She needs to go and, in an optimistic and confident frame of mind, listen to what the House of Commons has had to say and get a fresh approach. That's what we need.
Boris Johnson, thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, as you can see, MPs are just pouring out here into the lobby, and Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, joins me now. Well, I mean, nobody is sort of suggesting that anything realistic is possible there in terms of compromise. Where are you going to go?
Well, the Prime Minister's going to talk to people from right across the House, because...
Well, Boris Johnson has just said what he wants is the ability to leave the backstop. Is that possible?
Well, Boris Johnson is one backbencher.
Lots of people think that, as you know.
There's many backbenchers. And there's the front benches on the other side, and there's the DUP, and we heard a cacophony of voices in that debate, actually a high-quality debate, even though not one that brought a resolution. And what we need to do now is for the Prime Minister to speak to all of those senior parliamentarians and try to find a way through that commands the support of the House of Commons and can deliver a deal to deliver on the referendum result.
What's she going to hear that people haven't said up till now?
Well, she needs to listen, and so...
Do you think she hasn't been listening before?
No, of course she's been listening, but she's been trying to get the deal that
she has agreed. So what's different is what I mean. How can anything change?
Oh, there's a difference, and the difference is this, that thus far the Prime Minister has been negotiating with the EU in the national interest to get the deal that she profoundly believes to be the best deal available. That has clearly not cleared the hurdle of the House of Commons and commanded the majority of the House of Commons. And now she is asking for the views, and she'll be going out seeking the views of senior parliamentarians across the board to try to find something that does.
She said all along, this is it, this is the only deal. I mean, was she wrong then, or, was she mistaken? Is there some different deal that is possible now?
The thing is that she wasn't mistaken. She sought the best deal in the national interest, and Parliament hasn't supported it. And I regret that, because I think that this was the right deal. But she's going to have to find a balance in Parliament that will command a majority, because we're a parliamentary democracy. I mean, that's part of what Brexit was all about.
Are you not ruling out no deal because you still need that threat with Europe to try and get some other kind of arrangement?
Well, of course, no deal is not good news for the European Union, and I don't want to see it happen.
So is that why you're not ruling it out, though? I mean,
no, it's not that.
Because you could, couldn't you? I mean, no, MPs don't want it. The country doesn't want it. You could just say, whatever we do, we won't leave without a deal on March 29th.
But, it's the law of the land. That,
no, but you could change that.
Well, you think? It's quite difficult to change, to get the Commons.
What, you think if you put it to MPs, let's delay or let's not Brexit without a deal, that they wouldn't support you?
Well, it depends what the alternative is, because the only way that you can take no deal off the table is by the law of the land changing in favour of a deal. And that's what we tried to do today. We clearly didn't succeed. And now the Prime Minister needs to find a deal that can land a majority of the House of Commons. Because the thing about no deal and why it remains on the table is because it is the law. It's what happens unless a majority can be passed in favour of something else. And this has been one of the frustrations of this debate. There have been a lot of people, especially Jeremy Corbyn, who've just said, we're against this. And you can't do that if you're a grown-up, responsible politician.
Don't
you
you
need
think
to say what you're in favour of.
Needs to go. Doesn't somebody else need to take over the negotiations and say, I'm in charge now, and try and get a better deal?
No. I think the PM...
she's manifestly failed. She's failed over a long period of time. There is no reason to think she's going to be able to deliver anything different. Shouldn't she just go and give it to anybody else almost?
No, she shouldn't, for two reasons. Firstly, she's the right person to do this, and secondly, who is the alternative? There isn't one.
Any of them.
No.
Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt, you could have a go.
No.
You're not Theresa May, that's the point.
No. The point is that Theresa May has the confidence of the Conservative Party. She, I hope very much and expect tomorrow, we'll find that she has the confidence of the Commons, and now she's going to be discussing with parliamentarians right across the board to find a way through a deal that can maintain support. There's another way of looking at this. Last week, MPs voted against no deal. Now we need to find the deal that they will vote for and turn what has been a negative vote into a positive vote for a deal that will allow us to deliver on the result of the referendum, avoid no deal, and then get on to the stuff we really want to be talking about, like the future of the NHS.
Okay, Matt Hancock, thank you very much indeed for joining us. John?
Well, you could probably hear the helicopter over our heads. It's ours. Let's get up there and have a look down, because this is an absolutely momentous moment in British politics. And there it is, the so-called Mother of Parliaments. There's a mass of people gathered around it. There's traffic moving a little bit in the far distance. But this is an amazing scene, and after the break we'll have more reaction to Theresa May suffering a crushing defeat for her withdrawal agreement by 432 votes to just 202, the biggest defeat for a government in British history. Welcome to Westminster. Theresa May has suffered a crushing defeat by 230 votes for her withdrawal agreement. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is with me. This is in part about money. What about the markets?
A very mooted reaction, I have to say, John. Of course,
as if
much
they factored it in.
Much of this has been factored in. It's not as if they believed really that she would get this deal through. So it did fall, knee-jerk reaction about 1%. It's now back. Who knows? It could be up by the end of the programme. I have had, John, one interesting text from a big FTSE 100 company, from the boss of that company, who's described tonight's result as deeply disappointing, John, but depressingly predictable. He said the key question now for the Prime Minister, from him, from this boss, and from all the bosses really, is how quickly can Theresa May provide them with the certainty, the clarity that they've been asking for many years. That view has been echoed tonight by the CBI, the boss of the CBI, who's told me that they want answers within hours, John, not days, not weeks, within hours. How the Prime Minister is going to stop Britain sleepwalking, she said, into a no deal. She may be able to ask that themselves. Theresa May is due to be on this conference call with the Chancellor, with the Business Secretary, the Brexit Secretary, everybody, all the big guns, on a call at 9 o'clock, we're told tonight, with leading FTSE 100 bosses and all the business lobby groups. If that gets brought forward, John, we will try and give you some readout from that as soon as we can.
It's so extraordinary. We have had, shocks down history, and we've seen the markets react massively. This is a huge setback for the government, and yet nothing happens.
Well, I think, as we said, I think no one really expected her to get this deal through. Much of this has been priced into the market already, and that's why we're seeing the reaction that we have. Of course, John, though, if this uncertainty continues, if it prolongs, if it does look like we might crash out of the EU with no deal, then I think we might see a little bit more of a marked reaction from investors. But so far tonight, they are holding steady. No big reaction, but they will want answers pretty quick.
What is fascinating is that the crowd, which has been so thick here, has now evaporated. The flags have gone, the bell has stopped ringing, but Cathy's still breathing and she's in Downing Street.
No, I'm not in Downing Street. I'm just down the road from you, John, but there's plenty of flags behind me. They might have dispersed from the green there, but there's plenty of people still wanting to absorb the atmosphere and take in what has happened in the Commons. And for many of the People's Votes campaigners here, they feel, they've just been talking to me, they feel they've got a glimmer of hope now after that historic vote. They're clinging on to that. A lot of confusion about what happens next, and also quite a lot of anxiety about what Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, will do. A lot of people here would like him to come off the fence and back a second referendum. That's what they dearly love. They've been out here all day, as you've said, thousands of people in Parliament Square just up the road. There have also been some pro-Brexit campaigners. There was an EU flag burnt by them just here. But mostly all the protests and demonstrations have passed off peacefully. I mean, noisy, but there's been no violence. So it's been good-humoured, but very passionate, I'd say.
Thank you very much, Cathy. Now let's go north of the border to Edinburgh to our correspondent, Kieran Jenkins.
Well, Theresa May seems to be finally reaching out to other parties to try and get some sort of Brexit through. Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland's response seems to be, no thanks, you're all right. She's issued a statement tonight saying that her SNP will support Labour in that no confidence vote in the government, and two things must now happen. The clock must be stopped on Article 50, says Nicola Sturgeon, and legislation must be brought forward to put a vote to the people, again, a second EU referendum. Now, this is vital, of course, because Nicola Sturgeon has tied the fate of Scottish independence, another independence referendum, to the outcome of Brexit. And over the past few months, she's been saying, not yet, not until something shifts with Brexit. Clearly, we're almost at the time now where something maybe is going to happen with Brexit, and therefore something maybe might happen with a second independence referendum too. The Scottish Tories, by the way, are dead against a second EU referendum. They think it sets a dangerous precedent for another independence referendum. So the stakes are pretty high, and the circumstances couldn't be more fundamental over the coming days and weeks. Not only the UK's relationship with the EU at stake, but maybe Scotland's relationship with the UK as well.
Kieran Jenkins, thank you very much. Well, here in the lobby, I'm joined by former Cabinet Minister Justine Greening, who voted against Theresa May tonight, and Tobias Ellwood, current Government Minister, who I'm assuming voted with the government. But are you shocked by the scale of the defeat? 118 of your colleagues voted against it.
It was a huge defeat. You can't get away from that. And it's now a requirement, as the Prime Minister has spelled out, to see whether there is consensus across Parliament, the nation, government. These have been huge questions that haven't just taxed us over the last couple of years, but probably over the last 3 decades. It is our duty as parliamentarians and as government to now, having seen this deal be defeated, to see whether there is consensus that can be found in order to try and honour the result of the referendum.
She's made a terrible mess of it, hasn't she? That's the truth. I mean, you know, it's clear there is some sort of agreement between different groups on different issues.
Well, you touch on it.
And the way that the Prime Minister has conducted herself throughout has been to make this party political, about her, about the Conservative government, and dividing.
I wouldn't agree with that. What you touched on is so important. There are many, many factions in Parliament that are all calling for different answers, different solutions. Some want to jump to a second referendum. Some are now rallying around no deal, which I think would be very dangerous and an act of self-harm for the country. The duty now is to actually, now the deal has been tested and been found wanting, to see whether there is something that can bring us all together, that compromise that allows each of those groups to say, okay, I can accept I'm not to get my utopia, but maybe there's something in the middle that I'll be willing to accept.
Does such a thing exist, Justine Greening?
I've said for months I think Parliament is in gridlock. I think it was clear in the summer that we would be where we are today. We've wasted 6 months. So we can have no more procrastination. We now need the House to be able to vote on the very various different options, including whether we should exit on no deal. I've always felt that we would have no majority for anything, which is why I think you'll have to unblock this through allowing people a vote.
So this is a waste of time, then, is what you're saying? Is, they're going to reach out, they're not going to find agreement.
No, my point's the opposite. Actually, what I'm saying is we now need to test the will of the House on the other options. The key point, I think, is actually that this is no longer about what the Prime Minister wants. She needs to find out what the House wants and not rule out possible routes forward that we might be able to coalesce around. I think it's not facing up to the maths in Parliament over the last few months that led us to where we are tonight. So what we do now need to see is if we can work together to find a route through, but we need to do that in a matter of days, not weeks.
I mean, what do you think it is?
What is that consensus?
Yes.
Well, that's exactly what's being explored. I mean, you're criticising what has happened. Of course, another Prime Minister might have done something different, but I'm not sure how much so. We've seen the opposition have come up with no ideas themselves whatsoever. They're simply being opportunist about this.
Well, the truth is both main parties
if I can finish,
have treated this party politically.
If I can finish this, they, tonight, instead of offering a proposal, they've just gone straight for calling for a general election, a vote of no confidence. What the Prime Minister has said is that she will reach across the aisle to try and see whether there's that consensus to be. But it was very important, after working onto a deal which was agreed by 27 nations, that was put to the House. That's important. You dismiss that as if somehow it's a waste of time. It was important to test it and to see that it's tested and put it to the vote, and that's happened today.
It was clearly a mistake to lose a month over Christmas when we could have had this vote in December and then tried to find a consensus. But the issue is that Brexit's not about party politics. So Jeremy Corbyn and Labour can try a no confidence vote, but a general election is not how you fix Brexit. This is not about party politics. We now need to see if we can find a consensus. If we can't, then we have to unblock this with a referendum. But that's the process we rapidly need to go through.
So
now.
is she finally going to ring Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn? Which she said she had, which Keir Starmer said no one had called him.
I think that will be spelled out in the next few days. It won't just be Keir Starmer, it'll be a number of groups that will be spoken to. There'll be debates that will take place.
Ridiculous that nobody had?
No, because you have a government that wants to put forward its proposals, and we've had these issues to do with Northern Ireland. I served in Northern Ireland. No one wants to see a border re-emerge there, which would have a challenge to the economy there. We do not want to go down that road. Now, the DUP wanted additional assurances. She tried to secure those. Nobody, I don't think anybody would want to go down that road at all. But it's been tested. It's been put to the vote. It has failed. We now move on. We now try and strike relationships and discuss those things. But even Keir Starmer, what's his view? What's his proposal? It's not even clear what Labour wants to do.
Or maybe ring him and ask.
Well, that's where we are.
Tobias Selwood and Justine Green, thank you both very much.
Well, just joined now by Richard Burgon, Shadow Justice Minister, and Jo Swinson. Both are here now. Join me. Well, first of all, you've got the vote of confidence tomorrow night. Can you win it?
Let's see. I think that everybody has to understand this is the biggest defeat for a government in history. Theresa May should go. We need a general election, and we're going to be fighting to win that vote of no confidence.
But the maths
tomorrow.
don't support you, do they? I mean, are you really going to get a Tory to vote for you?
Well, she lost by 230 votes today. 118 Conservatives voted against her.
I know, but look, even Anna Soubry says she's not going to go with you.
Well, the lesson of today is anything can happen. And by the way, if we don't win that no confidence vote tomorrow, we may well bring one next time she suffers a humiliating defeat, which, as recent weeks have shown, might not be too long.
Jo Swinson, Liberal Democrats, what are you going to do?
Well, I'll clearly not be suggesting that we have any confidence in the Prime Minister Theresa May, but I have to say that that's not ultimately a way out of the mess, because what we need to do is resolve this.
You will be supporting her tomorrow night?
I won't be supporting Theresa May, no, funnily enough. I don't think she's doing a smashing job.
So you will vote against her?
I will be voting against her, but I don't think that necessarily resolves the situation. What we need to do is resolve this mess. Parliament is in a mess, and that's largely because of the way in which Theresa May and the Conservative government have handled this. But I have to say they haven't been helped by the official opposition, who, if they have a general election, you go into that election and you say you're going to be a vote for Labour is a vote for Brexit? I don't see how that resolves it.
Richard's answer.
Well, the Labour Party, Democratic Party, will decide our policy of the next election in the usual democratic way if and when a general election is forced. But we need that general election, not just for a new deal in relation to Europe, but for a new deal for every person who's been hurt by this cruel Conservative government and who was actually hurt by the Lib Dems when they were
All right,
with them.
what about a second referendum?
Beforehand.
Second referendum?
Our conference policy is clear. That's one option we don't rule out.
Well, now the table is with you and it's on it. What of it, therefore?
Pardon?
Well, the table is there, and everyone says it's an option. Is it still an option?
We're not ruling it out. The options are on the table.
It's 72 days till Brexit. You have to get off the fence, Richard. We can't wait for you to say, well, we should have a general election, but I can't tell you now whether we'd be for or against Brexit. For heaven's sake, we need an opposition.
Obviously, I won't take lessons from Lib Dems about sitting on the fence. They're masters of that. They were in government and inflicted austerity.
Well,
on
okay,
working class
second referendum, yes or no. What about you personally? Do you want a second referendum? Are you going to urge Jeremy Corbyn? After all, you have influence. You're the Shadow Justice Minister. Do you want a second referendum?
My priority is to get rid of this government.
No, that's not the question I asked you.
A new deal on Europe, a new deal on Europe, and a new deal for everybody.
About a second referendum. Are you in favour of one?
Well, I'm open-minded about that, but I think there are dangers in that. It's not a panacea, and the real reason the Lib Dems on 6%, the real reason the Lib Dems on 6% support a referendum is because they are desperate and will say anything to get into power, as they did last time.
We have been entirely consistent in saying that the Brexit deal should be put to the people.
You didn't even all vote against the Tories on Brexit.
We have been entirely consistent on that we need to have a people's vote. It's the manifesto that I stood and got elected on in 2017, and in fact now we find that is something which enjoys majority support in recent polls across the country,
enemies of the Conservatives.
And that is what we need to do.
You've been judged by history.
The
real enemies of the Conservatives.
That's what I'm fighting.
And you've aided and abetted them to hurt working class communities and all our diversity. I hope that rests well with your conscience.
Look, we went into coalition, and I think it was the right decision. I'm not saying we got everything right, but we're having a discussion now about Brexit, which is the pressing, looming challenge, and Labour is nowhere.
We're desperate for votes. We want to get into government.
No, I'm desperate to preserve the future of our country.
You don't sound like somebody who's trying to marshal more friends in the Commons to help you beat Mrs May. I mean...
Well, it's the duty of the Lib Dems to vote, and I'm pleased they will do on this occasion, against the Conservative government.
But you could be nicer about it. You're being awfully beastly.
Well, I recognise that the real enemy are the Conservatives.
But why not talk to her nicely? What do you want to say to her?
What I want to say is...
No, there's no need to bellow. Just say it nicely.
One day I hope you'll apologise for the bedroom tax, for all of the bad things, the austerity you inflicted on my constituents and others. But as we are where we are now, remember, the enemies of decency in this country at the moment is this Conservative government, and you need to join with us in helping us to get rid of them. Rule out ever getting into coalition with them, please.
Look, I'll be very straightforward, and I have said clearly that we are sorry for many of the things that we did in coalition. We didn't get everything right.
Would you never get in coalition with them ever again?
We didn't get everything right, but do you know what? I do believe in working together, and I'm working with...
Would you ever get in coalition with the Conservatives again?
Asking to work together. Why bellow at her?
I'm working with SNP MPs, despite the fact that I profoundly disagree with them about the future of Scotland. I'm working, yes, with some Conservative MPs, with the Green MP. I'm doing that because I think we need to work...
Do you promise never to get into coalition with the Conservatives ever again?
Let's not visit the past. We're dealing with the future.
Hypothetical for the next 50 years of my life.
Okay.
I believe in people working together. We need to be able to do that better, and I think the language of enemies
I want
is
to
not
thank
helpful.
both of you for coming on. Thank you both very much indeed. Let's go back to, I think we'll go to Strasbourg. Matt Fry. Matt.
Thanks, John. Well, welcome to the relative calm here of the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Let me read you this tweet from Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the Commission, who was saying, "I take note with regret the outcome of the vote in the House of Commons this evening. I urge the UK to clarify its intentions as soon as possible. Time is almost up. #Brexit. I think there you have the response of just about everyone here. Please tell us what you actually want, now that you've told us overwhelmingly what you don't want, even though we spent 2 years negotiating it. Let's talk to Anna Gomes. She's a Socialist MEP, member of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the European Parliament, from Portugal. First of all, your reaction to this?
Well, I was surprised.
Shocked but not surprised?
Yes,
right.
Not surprised but shocked anyway,
okay.
Because the defeat was even more staggering than anticipated. But the question now is indeed, what's next? And it doesn't look like the Labour motion of confidence
will succeed.
Will succeed.
Let's talk specifically then. There are many people in this Parliament and in European capitals who now expect London to ask for an extension of Article 50. Should that be granted?
I mean, if nothing works in the UK Parliament, it would seem sensible to give the vote back to the people.
Right.
And in order
to have a people's vote,
a second referendum, This will need to be concerted with the EU in the sense that there will have to be an extension of Article 50, and that needs the support, the consent of 27 member states.
We know that, but Article 50 extended also means Britain having to take part in the European elections in May.
Well,
now, those seats have already been
impossible.
allocated to other countries.
It depends on the speed in doing it all, but it is not impossible to have a second referendum and to have a later voting on European MEPs in Britain.
So in terms of the timetable, you see extension of Article 50, delay the European elections by a month.
Not the European elections, in Britain only,
right.
not in the rest
okay,
of
yeah, right. But then
then
have a referendum.
Yeah, because
before that,
the Article 50 would only be activated if the no votes for MEPs would only be if Article 50 would be activated. That can be postponed in order to allow for people.
Lots to discuss. We'll be here again. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
People are in an extraordinary state of excitement after this historic defeat for Theresa May. Joining me now is the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, James Cleverly, who supports Theresa May, Chuka Umunna from the Labour Party, who wants a second referendum. As you reach out to Chuka Umunna, is a second referendum one of the things you're prepared to consider now?
Well, Chuka, I don't want to put words in his mouth, has been admirably honest about his concerns about Brexit and his desire to stop it from happening. I think there are other people who pretend that a second referendum is about something other than stopping Brexit. I have little time for that position.
But is it on the table?
Well, for me, and the Prime Minister made it clear, that it is the duty of the government, the duty of Parliament, to deliver on the promise made at the referendum and the promise that 80% of us were voted here on a commitment to deliver Brexit.
Does that sound like they're reaching out to you?
Well, your viewers will make a decision on that. I mean, James is right. I've never made any bones about it. I think that the best deal that we have is the one as members of the European Union, and that was my ultimate goal. But I don't get to decide this. Ultimately, Parliament's got to come to a view, and the people, I think, are probably the only ones who are going to be able to resolve impasse and gridlock here. Now, I think before...
How do we get to your position then?
Well, look, there's two things that need to happen. I think we're going to need to extend Article 50 come what may. Even if, say, the Prime Minister was to put forward an alternative way forward and it got through Parliament next week, we've got to get through up to 1,000 pieces of secondary legislation and at least 3 more bills. I don't see how we're going to be able to do that in less than 40 sitting days, so we're going to need an extension to Article 50. Now, for those who are worried about crashing out with no deal, because we haven't done everything by that date, in what circumstances would the EU give us that extension? Now, they said no to more negotiation, and in fairness to James and the government, they've been clear that that's kind of what the EU is saying as well, but they have said if you want a democratic vote, we'll give you more time. So that is one way of avoiding no deal.
Just in 5 seconds, are you going to face up to that reality?
Well, I have said, the Prime Minister has said, if you want to leave without a deal, the best thing you can do is vote for this deal. Parliament didn't do that, so now Parliament is going to have to decide what it does want, rather than just queuing up to list the things it doesn't want.
Thank you both very much indeed. John.
Thank you very much, Christian. Well, now I'm joined by Gary Gibbon, our political correspondent, political editor. What do you make of it all?
We've been going through the voting tally to see who actually voted against the Prime Minister tonight, and it's absolutely extraordinary. The payroll voters, it's called, the people who have to vote for the Prime Minister because they're employed as government
Their
ministers.
salary depends upon it.
Or some of them unpaid parliamentary assistants, aides, and then some of them actually trade envoys, things like that. If you put those all together, there were 40 MPs that she managed to get the support of beyond a broad definition of the payroll vote. It's absolutely extraordinary. And when you go through the combination of people who were in there are a few Remainers, people who resigned from government because they wanted a second referendum, things like that. There are some people in the middle you weren't quite expecting to see there, but the bulk of them are Brexiteers. So if Theresa May wants to get a deal, does she tack towards them and potentially lose more Remainers, or does she tack towards Labour and make concessions, which could mean that that tally gets even added to? Tory MPs are saying to me, when they listen to Theresa May in the House just now, get up after the defeat and say, I'm going to start a conversation with Labour parliamentarians, they were just whispering into each other's ears, this is the end of the Tory party. We are going to split apart.
She herself is still secure.
She's secure she'll win the confidence vote tomorrow, but where will she pivot? And Labour MPs will be wanting her, at the very minimum, to start talking about full membership of a customs union, which explodes her own party.